Hello. Today I'm going to hopefully make some liquid metal. Something that will be very similar to mercury. It'll stay liquid at room temperature, but unlike mercury, is pretty much non-toxic. Though obviously it's metal, it shouldn't be involved with any electronics or anything like that. And the stuff does tend to temporarily leave stains on things. More about that later. The alloy is called Galinstan, and the name comes from Gallium, Indium and Tin stannous. So Galinstan alloy. You can see it on Wikipedia. The Galinstan name is actually a brand name, but it's also, according to Wikipedia, a generic name for this mixture, and it's now what's often used in such as metal-filled thermometers instead of mercury, because obviously mercury fumes are extremely toxic, whereas this, as I say, it's pretty harmless. There are other people that have done this on YouTube before. It's nothing particularly secret or rare about it, but the ones I've seen have used flames and crucibles and things. And I'm going to try and do it without using any of that, just simple domestic stuff and hot water, which I've tried it on a tiny amount and it seemed to work okay. So now I'm going to try and make 100 grams of the stuff and see what happens. So all the equipment is just a little ceramic pot, a cooking pot. I think these are, I've got one of these called now, ramekin. It is a heat-proof ceramic pot. And as I say, because this stuff does tend to mark and stain things, it's got to be something you don't mind not using for anything else afterwards. And the heat source is simply a microwavable plastic food dish. This is a microwavable. No, it's not Tupperware, but it's the same style, just a plastic food dish that can stand boiling water without problems. Those marks are just where the sticky label came off it. And a supply of hot water, a kettle or a pan or whatever. I'm going to put that on a padded bag, a bubble-filled padded bag, just purely as insulation to keep heating and stop it deforming my desk mat. I'll do it the other way around so it's camera better. So that's going to go in there as the kind of crucible to melt it in, just hot water temperatures rather than flames. And I will put something under that to support it, just to allow water underneath. Now I've got to get the water, so I'll pause for a minute. Oh no, sorry, the first thing I do is start measuring things. Obviously, that's the other bit you need, is some reasonably accurate scales. I've got some little ones here that came from eBay a while ago, which are supposedly accurate down to about 1/100th of a gram, which is ideal for something like this because the proportions are quite critical. And I'll start measuring stuff out. Gallium melts very easily. It actually melts at less than body heat. You hold the stuff in your hand and it'll turn to liquid. As I say, it'll also temporarily turn your skin black or grey because it wets anything, including glass and plastic. It needs special coatings to prevent it wetting things. So anyway, that's gallium. Now I'm going to actually have to melt that in hot water to get it coming out of the tube looking at it. Because it's been melted into and poured into the tubes as liquid. So, and that will need heating. And a little block of it, the indium and tin, I'll chop into lumps, small pieces with a pair of old side cutters to get to the correct totals. Now, as long as that's not molten, it's not going to stain anything, so I can just cut this up. So I'll start with indium. The proportions, looking at the Wikipedia page, 68.5% Galinstan, so that's going to be 68.5 grams to make 100 grams, or 6.85 if you're going to make 10 grams. And 21.5% indium, So I want 21.5 grams of this, and if I zero this, which I believe is that one, yeah, that's almost 100 grams. I had a fraction off it. You can see I chewed a little bit off it before. Now, the indium melts moderately easily. It's quite soft. The tin is the one that's hard to melt, but because of gallium's properties that it reacts with other metals or alloys very easily with other metals, once the gallium's liquid, it should be able to dissolve the tin without any massive heat. It's just enough to keep it molten, which is less than 40 degrees. So hot water should work fine. And this is going to take a while, so I'll probably fast forward through this. So I need 21 and a half, and I've got 3 so far. Could do with bigger cutters really, but these are the only ones I've got that I don't mind disposing of afterwards. The gloves are purely to prevent staining. The stuff's not toxic, as I say, but once I get around to the gallium or the metal liquid part, I think this is actually reacting with the cutters because it is sticking to them. Oh, that's according to that. That's it now. Right, that's enough. So I'll put that back in its bag and work on the tin. I'll put that on another bag to save it for now. That scale might have drifted slightly, but anyway. Right, so I need 10. That's that way there. So I want to chop it into small pieces once I've got the weight right. This is quite hard. .98. I think that's probably near enough. So that's the tin. And I'll put that in the scale cover, totally. Yeah. Put it in the scale cover. And then let the scales turn off. Save the battery. And I can finish chopping this up. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to put the tubes of gallium. Depending on what you get, it might come in tubes. There's all sorts of ways this could come, but it will be in some kind of container to prevent it melting in warm conditions in transit, or prevent it being lost if it melts. So I'll just go and put this in some hot water. Right, I've approximately half filled the plastic dish with boiling water. I've dropped some large steel nuts, 8mm size I think they were, in the bottom to stand the little dish on so water can flow underneath it and give better heat transfer. And I've put the 2 tubes of gallium in the side so they're fairly well submersed to start melting. Now again, that's going to take a minute or two to melt. And I want to probably melt the gallium first. So I'll break that in half. I've got a wooden barbecue skewer with a stirrer, which I'll break in half so I don't poke myself in the eye. One of the nuts is protruding underneath the dish. Let me show you what I mean with those. I'll hold the tube so they don't slide. And there's just some steel nuts I had kicking about from another project. This is probably going to take a minute or two to melt all the way through, because there's quite a mass of metal in each of these tubes, 50 grams in each tube, or less the bit I've used out of one. So there's a bit of heat capacity there to be taken up before it gets warm enough to melt. So I will just pause for a minute rather than keep you waiting and looking at nothing happening. Okay, continuing. A few minutes later, the gallium tubes have been standing in the hot water, which I've just replaced with fresh boiling water. You can see the steam coming off it, and in the meantime I've been chopping up the tin down to smaller pieces to help it dissolve faster, I hope. Now this does look now to be, look at that, that's now melted. I mean, it doesn't need this amount of heat to melt, but obviously the more heat around it, the quicker it'll melt, which is what I'm aiming for here. So you're not waiting about for an hour, and I'm not waiting about for an hour whilst I'm doing it. Right, I'm going to take that out and move the water for a minute so I can measure this, because that's one of the critical sections. It's getting the right masses of materials. I'll move both the water and the mat so I don't damage my desk. And get the scales back in. Now that might need a reheat. It might start setting, but it shouldn't really matter too much. It'll melt again quickly. Right, so put that on the scales. I have checked that these will stand. Oh, these. Oh, there we go, 0. I've checked that they will stand over 100 grams more material. So I'll start adding the gallium. I don't know if it's entirely liquid. Oh, if there's a chunk in it. Might be a chunk of metal still in it. Oh, that's it. There's supposed to be 50 in that tube, so that's pretty much all of it. But you can see how it's turned the tube silver, because it, as I say, it wets everything and it sticks. So I need a little bit out of the one. I want to be rather careful I don't overdo it. So I need 68.5 ideally. Six. It's actually trying to set it slightly. 68.9, a fraction too much. 0.4 gram too much. Which I'm hoping won't have too much effect, because I don't really know how I can take any back out. There we go. If I just, because it sticks to everything, I just stick something in it, and it should lift. Stand those tubes up. Something that I'm not bothered about wasting. Oh, there's a bit of there. It's actually a PTFE tube, but hopefully I'll take some of the scum off anyway. No, I won't actually. You can see it even sticks to PTFE. There's very few things it doesn't wet and stick to. But I'll find somewhere to put that now. There's a spare plastic bag over there. I'll go on that. Anyway, right, so it's fairly close. I wonder if I can suck a bit up with a bit of sleeving. So just a bit of plastic cable sleeve. Just squeeze it out and then use it as a kind of eyedropper type effect. That's nearer. Again, that's near waste. Anyway, that's the thing. It's at 68.6. I think that's near enough. So now, on the gallium, sorry, the indium. That's the gallium. Need the indium adding, and then back in. That can go back in the hot water now. Actually, before I do anything else with it, that's got all the right proportions of materials. So bring the hot water back in. That's still warm enough to be liquid in there, and it should heat up again now because the water's hot. So this is the 21.5 grams of indium, which should dissolve fairly easily, hopefully. Famous last words. You see it's even starting to stain the ceramic and all that. I might have to top up the hot water during this stage just to get enough heat energy into it, because adding cold metal obviously is going to cool down the gallium that's already there. And indium has got a higher melting point. That, I think it's starting to go. It will take a minute or two just to get enough heat into it. Being in hot water, the ceramic itself is hot. The last time I tried this, as I say, I made a small amount just as a test. It was a little plastic pot, just as something I could throw away afterwards, or give away or whatever. I actually gave it to someone else to play with, and that didn't have as good a heat capacity or transfer, so it took quite a long time. But I'm hoping this will be a little bit quicker. I could possibly cut it down to smaller pieces, but it's an experiment. Never known. I think part of it is the fact that the gallium is setting on this because it's cold, so it's still melting or remelting. Not like putting a bunch of ice cubes into water; they tend to freeze together initially. I think the pieces of indium are doing the same, though you see it's lumping a bit. It's gradually going. And obviously the tin is going to cool it even more, so I want to get it back up to reasonable heat before I start adding the tin. There's less and less breaking the surface, so it is dissolving. Or not dissolving, so melting and alloying. I think technically it's a eutectic mixture, where it's got this odd combination of melting point compared to the constituents. It's a bit like solder alloy, like 60-40 tin lead. The solder itself, once alloyed, has a melting point much lower than either tin or lead on its own. This is another type of combination that does something like that. There are others as well, but they tend to be rather unpleasant. Like there's one which I believe is sodium and potassium, which is liquid at room temperature. But obviously sodium and potassium metals are both extremely reactive and dangerous. So the stuff's only used in certain things where there's nothing else much you can replace it with. It's like one of them was, I believe, the cooling circuits for nuclear reactors, because as a metal it's got a very, very high heat capacity, and because of the properties of the alloy, it doesn't matter if the thing's shut down and allowed to cool. They don't have to try and remelt the entire cooling system before it'll start flowing, because it's a liquid straight up, still even at room or below room temperature. Right, that's pretty much melted in. Little bits, but not much. So I'm going to start adding the tin. Not start, just add the tin. Again, this is probably going to make it part of the set again because of the temperature difference. and I'm going to have to reheat the water or put fresh water in. Yeah, that's, you see it's going a bit gooey somehow as it starts to react and dissolve. It's not all wet yet even. So I'll give it 10 minutes or 10 minutes with some fresh water, and just pause in the meantime. Right, all I've done is nipped out and refill this dish from a pan of boiling water. I'll say it's about half or thereabouts. That should be getting some heat into it. And I still feel lumps of tin in it. But with the fresh heat from the water, hopefully it'll carry on dissolving. There's a bit of scum on it from other impurities or oxidation, I don't know which. This water is very hot, it's straight out of a hard boiling pan. Hope it's not steaming the camera up too much. Anyway, yeah, that actually seems to be dissolving quite well. The lumps are getting less and less obvious. There are some there. Well, I think that's not far off it, to be honest. I'm quite surprised actually. I thought it was going to take longer than this. As I say, last time I did it, I was using a plastic dish, which was not good for heat transfer. This ceramic one is working a lot better. I cannot feel any lumps of tin at all in there now. So I'll just give it a minute or two. In fact, no, that's going to be quite hot because of the boiling water, so I'm going to take it out and let it start cooling. I think it should keep evening out as it cools. I don't think I've actually touched the metal anyway, so I don't think I really need the gloves, but it's not a bad idea if you're handling hot liquids and things. A bit of extra skin protection so you don't burn yourself. Be very careful not to spill dishes and things like that, because it could be rather nasty. Okay, let's just do a little. Not really, I've got that bit of cloth already there, putting it on. So that's still hot. I mean, it'd be unpleasant to touch without the gloves. It's not that I won't like to hold it too long with them. So it needs to cool down. But I cannot feel any lumps at all in that now. I don't think there's any bits of metal, so it's just a matter of making sure it's really mixed evenly, so the alloy has even properties. As you can see there, it's actually wet the ceramic glaze quite well. It's climbed the wall when I've been stirring it. Oops, that's one of the tubes of gallium falling over, or the empty tube. The other one's still molten, by the way. It's not cooled down again yet. No, it doesn't feel warm anymore. As I say, it only needs to be barely blood heat before it melts. It's on about 30 degrees or something like that, centigrade. So it melts under body temperature. But yeah, this Galinstan appears to be okay. Now, the big test is what it's like when it's stone cold, which is going to take quite a while. So I'll leave it there and get back to it in a while. Hello, right, back. It's now the next day, due to an interruption for something I'd forgotten completely about last night. This is now a stone cold room temperature, which at the moment is about 18 degrees centigrade, and as you can see, it is still completely liquid. Bit of oxide on the top, but the material itself is completely liquid, and it should, if we've got the proportions correct, stay that way down to, I think, nearly minus 20 degrees. So that's That is Galinstan alloy, or a very close approximation thereof. No special materials, just hot water for a heat source to melt the metals.